Break the rules, build better ones. Make up new rules to be a genius. By David Rousseau. Introduction. Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world where everything you know about how things work no longer applies. Traffic lights ignore you. Social expectations feel like a foreign language. The routines and conventions that have guided your life vanish overnight. What would you do? More importantly, how would you figure out what still matters and what doesn't? Rules are everywhere. They shape our behavior, guide our decisions, and define how we interact with others. Some are explicit laws, policies, manuals. Others are invisible, stitched into culture, habit, and expectation. Together, they give life a sense of order, helping us navigate the chaos. Often, we rely on rules of thumb, quick heuristics that simplify choices. But every rule carries an underlying assumption that it works most of the time. And yet, exceptions always exist. Some are small. Some are the moments that change everything. Many rules survive simply because that's how it's always been done. They are inherited, repeated, rarely questioned. At work, it might be wearing a formal outfit because tradition demands it, even if casual clothing would boost creativity and collaboration. In society, it might be adhering to rituals without considering whether they still hold meaning. Rules have guided progress, and they've also held it back until someone decided to rethink them. Breaking rules isn't about chaos or recklessness. Thoughtful rule breaking starts with curiosity. It asks, why does this rule exist? Who benefits? Does it still make sense today? From Galileo challenging the church to innovators, redesigning workplaces or imagining life on Mars, real breakthroughs often begin when rules are examined, stretched, or rewritten. Even small acts of deviation, a question, a gesture, a different approach can create outsized change. It's the moment when you choose to march to the drumbeat of a genius. This audiobook explores why rules exist, why we follow them, and what happens when we don't. We'll look at social norms, cultural expectations, personal limitations, and historical examples. We'll delve into the psychology of obedience, the gap between written laws and unwritten conventions, and the moments when breaking a rule produces something better. By the end, you'll understand rules, respect them, and when the time is right, challenge them wisely, because true creativity, innovation, and growth don't just follow rules, they sometimes invent them. Chapter 1. The Purpose of Rules. Why do rules exist? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Rules maintain order. They tell us what's acceptable, what isn't, and provide a framework to live together without chaos. But they go deeper. They reflect tradition, culture, and the beliefs of generations past. Some rules are codified laws, regulations, formal policies. Others are invisible, woven into social norms, customs, and everyday habits. Consider the typical response when someone asks, "Why do we do it this way?" The classic, "Because we've always done it that way." On the surface, it seems harmless, but these inherited rules often outlive their original purpose, shaping behavior long after they've lost relevance. Rules also act as mental shortcuts, letting us navigate life efficiently without analyzing every decision. They create predictability, foster trust, and simplify interactions. Waiting in line, following etiquette, dressing appropriately at work, these behaviors all maintain order. Yet efficiency comes at a cost. Rules unquestioned can stifle creativity, preserve outdated practices, and limit human potential. A company may insist on suits and ties because of tradition, even if casual attire would encourage collaboration and innovation. A society may cling to centuries-old customs that no longer serve a meaningful purpose. History, innovation, and daily life show that rules are not immutable. They are human creations, open to adaptation, and sometimes ready to be broken. Understanding why a rule exists is the first step toward discerning when to follow it, bend it, or reinvent it. Every rule has a purpose, but not every rule deserves blind obedience. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Obedience. Why do people follow rules, even when they don't fully agree with them? Obedience is a subtle, powerful force guiding human behavior. From childhood, we are taught to listen, comply, and respect authority. Parents, teachers, and institutions reinforce that following rules isn't just expected, it's morally right. But obedience isn't just about morality, it's about ease. When someone else defines the rules, the mental load of decision-making decreases. You don't have to evaluate every choice. You follow the system already in place. This creates stability, especially when uncertainty looms. Obedience can feel safer than resistance. Psychologists have studied this deeply. Stanley Milgram's famous 1960s experiments revealed how far people would go under authority even administering what they believed were painful shocks because someone in charge instructed them to continue. The shocking takeaway wasn't malice, it was compliance. Many participants hesitated. Many felt uneasy, yet they continued, often trusting authority, feeling obligated, or assuming the responsibility was no longer theirs. This shows that obedience is often automatic, shaped by environment, conditioning, and social pressures. Authority amplifies this effect. Orders from a manager, government official, or recognized expert carry weight. Questioning them can feel uncomfortable, even wrong. Social pressure strengthens the effect. If everyone around you follows a rule, it signals this is normal. Deviating can feel isolating or risky. Habit plays a role too. Many rules are so ingrained that we follow them unconsciously. While this efficiency helps life function, it can also blind us to rules that have outlived their usefulness. Fear reinforces obedience, fear of consequences, judgment, or standing out. Even mild discomfort keeps us aligned with expectations. Obedience itself isn't inherently bad. It's valuable when rules are fair and meaningful. It becomes dangerous when it replaces independent thought with automatic compliance. The key question isn't do we obey? It's why. Are we following a rule because it makes sense, or just because it exists? Acting out of understanding, rather than habit or pressure, creates a critical space, the ability to choose. And in that space, awareness begins. Chapter 3. The Art of Rule Breaking. Breaking rules is often seen as reckless, disruptive, or even dangerous. From a young age, we're taught to avoid it, to stay within boundaries, follow instructions, and do what's expected. But not all rule breaking is careless. In fact, some of the most meaningful progress in history has come from people who knew exactly which rules to challenge and how to do it. The difference lies in intention. Reckless rule breaking ignores consequences. It's impulsive, reactive, and often driven by frustration or ego. Thoughtful rule breaking, on the other hand, is deliberate. It begins with understanding the rule, why it exists, who it serves, and where it falls short. Only then does it question whether the rule still deserves to be followed. This is what makes rule breaking an art. It requires awareness, judgment, and timing. It's not about rejecting structure entirely, but about recognizing when structure becomes limitation. A good rule breaker doesn't act blindly, they observe patterns, notice inconsistencies, and look for opportunities where change is needed. Consider innovation. Many breakthroughs happen not because someone followed the rules perfectly, but because they challenged assumptions others took for granted. They asked different questions. They tried what wasn't supposed to work, and in doing so, they expanded what was possible. But effective rule breaking isn't loud or chaotic, it's often subtle. Sometimes it looks like asking a question no one else is asking. Sometimes it's choosing a different approach when everyone else follows the same path. And sometimes it's quietly refusing to accept a limitation that no longer makes sense. There's also a balance to maintain. Breaking too many rules without direction leads to disorder. Following all rules without question leads to stagnation. The art lies in knowing where that line is, and having the courage to step across it when necessary. This is where strategy comes in. Before breaking a rule, it helps to consider the impact. What are the risks? Who might be affected? What outcome are you trying to create? Thoughtful rule breaking is not just about disruption, it's about improvement. It aims to replace something outdated with something better. It also requires responsibility. When you choose to break a rule, you're stepping outside the safety of the system. That means accepting the consequences, whether they're positive or negative. It means standing behind your decision, rather than hiding from it. And yet, despite the risks, rule breaking can be powerful. It can challenge assumptions, inspire new ways of thinking, and create space for change. It can reveal flaws in systems that seemed untouchable, and sometimes, it can lead to entirely new rules, ones that are more effective, more inclusive, and more aligned with reality. But perhaps most importantly, thoughtful rule breaking begins with a simple shift in mindset. Instead of asking, "Am I allowed to do this?" it asks, "Does this make sense?" That question opens the door to possibility, because rules are not just lines to follow, they are ideas to examine, and when we learn how to question them with clarity and purpose, we don't just break rules, we start to reshape them. Chapter 4: Social Norms versus Written Rules. Not all rules are written down. Some of the most powerful rules we follow every day don't exist in laws, policies, or official guidelines. They live quietly in expectations: how we speak, how we dress, how we greet one another, and how we behave in different situations. These are social norms, and unlike written rules, they are rarely explained. They are simply understood, or at least, expected to be. Written rules are clear. They tell you exactly what is allowed and what is not. If you break them, the consequences are usually defined fines, penalties, or formal consequences. Social norms, however, operate differently. They rely on shared understanding rather than enforcement. When you break a social norm, the response is often subtle: a pause in conversation, a raised eyebrow, a feeling that something is off. And yet, these unwritten rules can be just as powerful, sometimes even more so. Why? Because they shape belonging. Following social norms signals that you understand the group, that you fit in, that you respect the culture. Breaking them, even unintentionally, can create distance. It can make others uncomfortable, not necessarily because harm was done, but because expectations were disrupted. Think about everyday situations: standing too close to someone in a line, speaking too loudly in a quiet setting, ignoring a greeting. None of these actions are illegal, but they feel wrong because they go against shared social expectations. This is where things become complex. Unlike written rules, social norms vary across cultures, environments, and contexts. What is considered polite in one place may seem unusual or even rude in another. A gesture, a tone, or a behavior can carry completely different meanings depending on where you are and who you're with. Because of this, social norms are constantly shifting. They evolve over time, influenced by culture, technology, and changing values. What was once expected may no longer apply. What was once unusual may become accepted. This fluid nature makes social norms both flexible and unpredictable, and it also creates opportunities. Breaking a written rule often leads to clear consequences. Breaking a social norm, however, can sometimes lead to something unexpected: connection, insight, or change. When done thoughtfully, it can challenge assumptions and open new ways of interacting. But the risk is real, because social norms are tied to perception. Breaking them can easily be misunderstood. What feels like authenticity to one person may feel like disrespect to another. This is why awareness matters. Understanding the context, the people involved, and the potential impact can make the difference between a meaningful gesture and an uncomfortable moment. In some cases, breaking a social norm can be powerful precisely because it is unexpected. It can interrupt routine, shift attention, and create a moment that feels more human than scripted. These moments often stand out not because they follow the rules, but because they didn't. Still, not every norm needs to be challenged. Some exist for good reason. They create ease, reduce friction, and help people navigate social spaces smoothly. The goal is not to reject them entirely, but to recognize them for what they are: shared habits, not absolute truths. When you begin to see the difference between written rules and social norms, you gain a new kind of awareness. You start to notice which behaviors are required and which are simply expected, and in that distinction lies a quiet kind of freedom. Because once you understand the difference, you're no longer just reacting to the world around you. You're choosing how to engage with it. Chapter 5: When Rules Clash. What happens when two rules point in opposite directions? Most of the time, rules give us clarity. They simplify decisions and guide our actions. But occasionally, they collide. A situation arises where following one rule means breaking another, and suddenly, what seemed straightforward becomes complicated. These moments reveal something important. Not all rules carry the same weight. Consider a simple example. You're told to always tell the truth. But what if telling the truth would cause unnecessary harm? What if honesty conflicts with kindness? In that moment, you are no longer choosing between right and wrong. You are choosing between two different versions of right. This is the nature of rule conflict. Some rules are legal, others are moral. Some are shaped by culture, while others come from personal values. When they align, decisions feel easy. When they don't, we are forced to think more deeply about what truly matters. Legal rules, for instance, are designed to create order and fairness at a large scale. They apply broadly and aim to protect society as a whole. But legal does not always mean ethical. History has shown that laws can be flawed, outdated, or unjust. Moral rules, on the other hand, are more personal. They come from our sense of right and wrong, shaped by upbringing, culture, and experience. These rules may not be written down, but they often feel stronger because they are internal. When legal and moral rules clash, the decision becomes more than practical, it becomes personal. Do you follow the system or your conscience? There is no universal answer. Some people choose to follow the rule as written, believing that structure must be preserved. Others choose to challenge it, accepting the risks in order to stay true to their values. Both choices come with consequences. There are also conflicts between cultural expectations and individual instincts. You may find yourself in a situation where a social norm feels uncomfortable or outdated, yet breaking it could be seen as disrespectful. In these moments, the tension is not just about action, it's about identity, belonging, and perspective. What makes these situations difficult is uncertainty. There is no clear instruction to follow, no simple guideline to rely on. The usual rule of thumb doesn't apply. Instead, you must weigh context, consider impact, and make a judgment call. This is where awareness becomes essential. Rather than reacting automatically, you pause. You ask questions. What is the purpose behind each rule? Who does it serve? What are the consequences of following one over the other? And perhaps most importantly, what outcome aligns with your values? These questions don't guarantee an easy answer, but they lead to a more thoughtful one. When rules clash, you are no longer just following a system, you are engaging with it. You are interpreting it, evaluating it, and in some cases, redefining it through your choices. These moments can feel uncomfortable, even stressful, but they are also opportunities. They push you to think critically, to act intentionally, and to take responsibility for your decisions. They remind you that rules are not perfect and that sometimes navigating between them requires more than obedience. It requires judgment, because in the end, the most difficult decisions are not about choosing between right and wrong. They are about choosing which right matters most. Chapter 6. Lessons from History. History is often shaped by people who refuse to accept the rules as they were given. At the time, these individuals were not always seen as heroes. Many were criticized, ignored, or even punished for challenging authority. Yet, looking back, their actions reveal something powerful. Progress rarely comes from unquestioned obedience. It comes from those willing to ask, what if the rule is wrong? Consider the case of Galileo Galilei. In a time when the dominant belief supported by powerful institutions was that the Earth stood still at the center of the universe, Galileo supported a different idea, that the Earth moved around the sun. This wasn't just a scientific disagreement, it was a direct challenge to accepted authority. The rule, in this case, was not written as a simple law, but it was enforced just as strongly. Galileo's ideas were met with resistance. He was pressured to recant, and his work was restricted. Yet his willingness to question the established view helped lay the foundation for modern science. His story reminds us that rules tied closely to tradition or authority can resist truth, even when evidence is clear. Centuries later, similar patterns appeared in social movements. During the civil rights movement in the United States, many laws enforced segregation and inequality. These were official, written rules, legally binding and widely upheld. But activists and ordinary citizens began to challenge them. not out of rebellion for its own sake, but because the rules themselves were unjust. They organized protests, staged sit-ins, and refused to comply with laws that denied basic rights. In doing so, they broke the rules, but they also exposed their flaws. Their actions forced society to confront a difficult question. Should rules be followed simply because they exist, or should they be judged by their fairness? Change did not happen instantly. It came with resistance, sacrifice, and risk. But over time, those challenges led to meaningful reform. History offers many such examples, moments where people stepped outside accepted boundaries and, in doing so, expanded what was possible. These individuals did not ignore rules blindly. They understood them deeply enough to see where they failed. That understanding is key. Effective rule breaking is not about rejecting everything that exists. It's about identifying the gap between what is and what should be. It's about recognizing when a rule no longer serves its original purpose or when it serves only a few at the expense of many. It's also important to remember that not all rule breaking leads to positive outcomes. History includes examples of disruption that created harm rather than progress. This is why intention and awareness matter. The goal is not simply to challenge authority, but to improve what exists. What we learn from history is not just that rules can be broken, it's how and why they are broken that determines their impact. When rule breaking is guided by evidence, values, and a vision for something better, it has the potential to reshape systems and shift perspectives. It can turn ideas once considered impossible into accepted reality. And often, it begins with a single question: does this rule still deserve to exist? Because every rule we follow today was created at some point in the past. And just like those before us, we have the ability not just to follow them, but to change them. Chapter 7. Innovation requires rule breaking. Innovation rarely begins with agreement. It begins with discomfort, with noticing that something doesn't work as well as it could. A process feels outdated, a solution feels limited, or a system produces results but not the right ones. In these moments, strictly following the rules maintains the status quo. True progress demands looking beyond the familiar boundaries. Innovation requires asking questions that rules often discourage. Why do we do it this way? What if there's a better approach? What happens if we try something radically different? These questions don't ignore rules, they examine them. Many rules were created for a specific context, based on conditions that no longer exist. Workplaces, for example, once enforced formal dress codes to signal professionalism, yet in today's collaborative environments, casual attire can boost comfort, creativity, and productivity. Sometimes, innovation requires even bigger leaps. Think about living on Mars or the Moon. The rules of daily life on Earth, housing, clothing, social habits, even oxygen management cannot simply transfer to another planet. Surviving in space demands breaking familiar rules and creating entirely new systems. It's a reminder that rules are context-dependent, and sometimes the old ones must be reimagined to match a new reality. The process requires discernment. Innovation isn't about chaos. It's about thoughtful rule breaking. It's understanding which rules support progress and which hold it back. It involves observation, experimentation, and reflection. It asks us to step outside comfort zones, accept uncertainty, and embrace the possibility of failure as information rather than defeat. Over time, small acts of thoughtful deviation accumulate into significant change. New ideas become new standards, new approaches become new rules, and what once seemed impossible becomes normal. Breaking rules, when done with purpose and insight, transforms boundaries into possibilities. Innovation isn't about rejecting rules, it's about reshaping them to fit the world we want to create. Whether that's a more creative office, a society that adapts, or humanity reaching for the stars. Chapter 8. The risk and reward of breaking rules. Breaking rules can be exhilarating. It can open doors to creativity, innovation, and unexpected opportunities. But it also comes with risks, real consequences, that must be considered before stepping outside the boundaries. The decision to break a rule is rarely simple. It requires weighing potential rewards against possible costs, and understanding the context in which the rule exists. The first risk is obvious: consequences. Some rules carry penalties for a reason. Laws, workplace policies, and safety regulations exist to protect people and systems. Ignoring them can lead to fines, lost opportunities, or even harm. But risk is not limited to formal rules. Social norms, cultural expectations, and unspoken agreements can punish those who step outside them with criticism, isolation, or damaged relationships. Breaking a rule without awareness can have immediate and long-lasting repercussions. Yet risk alone does not deter those who challenge rules thoughtfully. They recognize that every meaningful change involves stepping into uncertainty. The reward lies in what can be gained: freedom, innovation, respect, or progress. When carefully considered, breaking a rule can create outcomes that following the rule never could. It can spark conversations, reveal new perspectives, or inspire others to reconsider outdated assumptions. Risk and reward are closely linked. The greater the potential impact, the higher the stakes. Bold actions like challenging unjust laws or defying entrenched traditions can lead to extraordinary change, but they often come with scrutiny or resistance. Conversely, small, thoughtful deviations like testing a new approach in a familiar system can produce subtle improvements with lower risk. Both forms of rule-breaking require courage, but the scale and consequences differ. The key is intention. Reckless rebellion may feel liberating in the moment, but it rarely creates lasting value. Thoughtful rule-breaking, however, is deliberate. It involves understanding the purpose of the rule, the people it affects, and the outcomes you hope to achieve. This awareness allows you to act in a way that maximizes benefit while minimizing harm. There's also timing. Even a well-considered action can fail if introduced at the wrong moment. Some rules can be bent gradually, allowing others to adapt. Others require decisive, immediate action to seize an opportunity. Recognizing when to act and when to wait is as important as recognizing which rules to challenge. Ultimately, breaking a rule is an exercise in responsibility. It asks you to accept both success and failure, reward and consequence. It is a choice that cannot be undone, but can lead to growth, innovation, or transformation if approached thoughtfully. When done with care, breaking rules is not an act of chaos, it is an act of courage. It is a decision to challenge limits, explore possibilities, and shape outcomes in ways that following rules alone never could. And in the delicate balance between risk and reward lies the true power of thoughtful rebellion. Chapter 9: Cultural Rules and the Unexpected Gesture. Rules are not just written laws or formal policies, they also live in culture, in unspoken expectations, and in traditions passed down over generations. These cultural rules shape how we interact, how we show respect, and how we communicate without saying a word. Breaking them can be risky because, unlike written rules, the consequences are often unpredictable and tied to perception. But sometimes, breaking a cultural rule can create a profound human impact. A striking example comes from a formal meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. In Japanese diplomatic culture, bows are the customary way to greet and show respect, precise, measured gestures that convey humility and adherence to tradition. Yet, in this encounter, a warm embrace occurred instead of the expected bow. This single action broke an unspoken cultural rule, but it communicated something far more meaningful than strict adherence to protocol. The embrace conveyed warmth, human connection, and mutual respect between the leaders. It demonstrated that sometimes the essence of a cultural rule is best honored not through rigid compliance, but through understanding its spirit and responding to the moment. By bending the customary expectation, the leaders created a gesture that resonated far beyond formalities. Cultural rules exist to maintain cohesion, prevent offense, and create predictable interactions. They provide guidance in unfamiliar situations, helping people navigate complexity without words. But they can also constrain authenticity. When unspoken rules are rigid, they leave little room for spontaneity, creativity, or emotional expression. Yet carefully chosen deviations from these norms can communicate more than strict obedience ever could. Sometimes the deviation is smaller, yet just as meaningful. A fist bump instead of a handshake, a smile instead of a formal bow. The action may break expectation, but it conveys warmth, trust, and attention to the moment, reminding us that even everyday gestures carry the same principle. Rules exist to serve people, not constrain them. Breaking a cultural rule requires awareness and sensitivity. It is not about disregard or disrespect, it is about intention. One must understand the meaning behind the norm, the expectations of others, and the context in which the action occurs. Done thoughtlessly, deviation can offend or alienate. Done thoughtfully, it can create connection, signal empathy, and even redefine what is considered acceptable in a culture over time. The greeting between Trump and Takaichi, paired with everyday examples like the fist bump, illustrates this beautifully. The rule said formality. The moment called for humanity. By understanding the spirit of the rule and the emotions of the moment, they made choices that honored connection rather than strict tradition. It is a subtle reminder that rules, particularly cultural ones, are meant to serve people, not constrain them, and in that awareness knowing when a rule exists to guide and when it exists to limit, we see the power of thoughtful rule breaking. Chapter 10. Breaking Your Own Rules. Rules are not only external, they live inside us as well. From childhood, we create guidelines for ourselves, habits, routines, and personal standards that shape how we think, act, and interact with the world. Some of these self-imposed rules are helpful. They provide structure, focus, and a sense of identity. Others, however, can become limitations, holding us back from growth, creativity, or new experiences. Breaking your own rules begins with awareness. The first step is noticing them. Which habits do you follow automatically, without questioning why? Which beliefs do you accept as absolute, even when they no longer serve you? Personal rules can be subtle. I never speak up in meetings. I always stick to the plan. Or I don't take risks with relationships. They may feel like safety nets, but they can also act as barriers. Once you see them, you can evaluate them. Ask yourself, are these rules helping me achieve my goals? Are they supporting my values, or limiting them? Are they protecting me, or keeping me stuck? This reflection is not about abandoning all discipline, it's about choosing which rules deserve loyalty, and which deserve challenge. Breaking your own rules requires courage. Unlike external rules, there may be no clear consequence for following or breaking them, but the internal resistance can be strong. Fear of discomfort, failure, or judgment often keeps us adhering to habits that no longer serve us. Yet, it is precisely in stepping beyond these invisible boundaries that we discover new potential. Consider creativity. Many artists, writers, and innovators break their own rules daily, discarding routines, challenging self-imposed limitations, or rethinking methods they once believed fixed. They know that innovation rarely happens within rigid personal constraints. Flexibility and experimentation are key. Similarly, in life, challenging personal rules can lead to richer relationships, bolder decisions, and a deeper understanding of oneself. There is also a balance to maintain. Some personal rules protect our well-being, maintain focus, or uphold integrity. The goal is not reckless abandonment, but thoughtful evaluation. Breaking a rule should be intentional, purposeful, and aligned with growth or curiosity. Ultimately, breaking your own rules is an act of self-empowerment. It is a way of reclaiming control over the standards that shape your life, rather than being unconsciously shaped by them. Each time you challenge a personal limitation thoughtfully, you expand what is possible for your habits, your choices, and your life. By understanding which rules to keep and which to bend, you learn not just to live, but to live more fully. You discover that sometimes the most meaningful rules to break are the ones you set for yourself, and that doing so can open the door to creativity, courage, and freedom. Conclusion: rules are essential. They provide structure, create safety, and allow people to coexist in an organized and predictable way. From traffic signals to social etiquette, from workplace policies to cultural norms, rules guide behavior and reduce uncertainty. Without them, chaos would be inevitable. Yet rules are not absolute, they are human creations, designed to serve a purpose, and they carry limits. Blind obedience can keep us safe, but it can also hold us back, stifling growth, creativity, and the kind of insight that defines genius. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored the many dimensions of rules, why they exist, why we follow them, and what happens when we break them thoughtfully and intentionally. We've examined obedience, how it is shaped by authority, habit, and social pressure. We've explored the art of rule breaking, the tension between written regulations and social norms, and the lessons history offers about courage, creativity, and innovation. We've considered risk and reward, and the power of bending cultural and personal rules to expand possibility. Breaking rules does not mean acting recklessly. It means understanding rules deeply, enough to know their purpose, and having the courage to step beyond them when the situation calls for it. It requires discernment, responsibility, and timing. The greatest innovators, leaders, and change-makers didn't reject rules blindly. They challenged them with insight, intention, and a vision for something better. Even a small act of thoughtful deviation, a question, a gesture, or a new approach can spark transformation that following the rules alone never could. Like the Japanese diplomat who hugged instead of bowed. Breaking a rule can carry more meaning than compliance. It can humanize interactions, foster connection, and leave a lasting impression. In our personal lives, questioning our self-imposed limitations can unlock growth, imagination, and freedom. The power of breaking rules lies not in chaos, but in choice, knowing when to follow, when to question, and when to act differently. Ultimately, the goal is not to abandon rules entirely, but to respect them while understanding their limits. Rules are tools, not masters. By learning when and how to bend them thoughtfully, we open the door to innovation, empathy, and a life lived with purpose. Genius emerges not from blind obedience, but from the courage to see possibility where others see limits, to understand rules, challenge them wisely, and invent new ones that shape a better world. When we read the spirit behind rules and act with intention, we gain the freedom to think creatively, act humanely, and spark transformation, sometimes with a single question, gesture, or choice. That is the mindset of genius, a life guided by rules, yet never constrained by them. Genius isn't made by following rules, it's made by understanding them, bending them wisely, and creating new ones that the world didn't know it needed. Look around, question one rule today, and imagine how it could become better. That is the first step toward genius.